All right, so we're diving into this article you share. It's called Why Some People Attract Money Effortlessly and How You Can Too. And honestly, the title alone kind of makes me raise an eyebrow. Like, is this for real or is this just like more self-help hype?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think we answer is a little more nuanced than just a yes or no. But what I think is fascinating is that this article really tries to dig into like the psychology behind wealth and not just like the tactics.
Okay, so less about like 7 steps to a Lambo and more about what's going on in the minds of people who just seem to like attract money. I'm intrigued, but I'm also a bit skeptical.
Yeah, healthy skepticism is always good. But here's one of the things that caught my eye. They were talking about how wealthy individuals often see opportunities where other people just see problems. And it's not just about like being optimistic. It's like they actually process the world differently in a way.
So instead of complaining about like the economy or whatever, they're thinking, how can I make this work for me? Is that kind of what you mean?
Exactly. And the article actually gave a really good example. They were talking about like a product shortage, right? And most people would just focus on like the inconvenience of that. But someone with this like wealth mindset that they talk about, they might see it as an opportunity to maybe create a better supply chain or like solve that problem and profit in the process.
Okay, that's starting to make sense. So they're not just lucky, they're looking at things differently. But isn't that just being like an entrepreneur?
Well, I think it's a piece of the puzzle, but there's more to it than that. This article claims that a lot of us, we're running on these like subconscious money scripts that actually hold us back. We might say things like, oh, money doesn't grow on trees, or rich people just got lucky.
Oh, I've definitely heard those before. But are they really that powerful? I mean, it's just talk, right?
Well, think of it this way. Imagine your subconscious mind is like a computer program. And if it's constantly running this script that says money is scarce, it's going to affect your actions even if you don't realize it. You might avoid risks or undervalue your work or even like self-sabotage without even knowing why.
Whoa, that's kind of freaky, but it also kind of makes sense. So if those negative beliefs are like bad code, what would be the good code for attracting wealth then?
Well, that's where the article brings up this idea of a wealthy person's operating system. And it's about like rewiring those beliefs. So instead of scarcity, you try to cultivate abundance. Instead of seeing money as like evil or whatever, you see it as a tool to create value and make an impact.
Okay, that's a big shift. But is this just about thinking positive thoughts all the time? Because I've tried that and my bank account didn't magically grow.
Well, positive thinking is a good start, but it's not the whole story. This reprogramming that they talk about is a lot deeper than that. And the article mentions 3 main strategies they talk about. The first one is conscious awareness of your money beliefs. The second one is like designing your environment to actually support abundance. And then the third one is having these daily practices that help reinforce this new mindset.
Okay, I'm starting to see like the bigger picture here. So it's not just about wishful thinking, it's about intentional action on like multiple levels.
Exactly. So why don't we start unpacking each one of these strategies? First up, becoming aware of your money beliefs. This is about paying attention to those automatic thoughts that kind of pop up when you're dealing with finances.
So like catching myself when I say things like I can't afford that even if I haven't actually like checked my budget.
Precisely. It's about noticing those like ingrained beliefs that might be limiting you without you even realizing it.
And once I'm aware of those thoughts, what do I do? Just try to think positive instead.
It's a little more than just like replacing a negative thought with a positive one. It's about questioning the belief itself. Like ask yourself, where did this belief come from? Is it actually true? And does it serve me? You might be surprised what you uncover when you really dig into it.
Okay, that's really interesting. It's like digging down to the root of the problem instead of just like putting a Band-Aid on it. Okay, so that's conscious awareness. What about designing your environment? Does that mean I need to redecorate my apartment in like gold and platinum?
Not necessarily, though a touch of luxury can definitely be inspiring, I'm not going to lie. But it's more about like surrounding yourself with things and people that actually support your goals. So it's about minimizing exposure to negativity and that scarcity mindset, both physically and mentally.
So less doom scrolling on social media and more time with people who are excited about building wealth and making a difference.
That's a great example. It's also about like, creating a workspace that inspires you, seeking out mentors or role models, and immersing yourself in information that supports your financial growth.
All right, that makes sense. So we've got awareness and environment. And then there are these daily practices. Is this where we get into the affirmations and vision boards? I'm not going to lie, that stuff has always felt a bit cheesy to me.
I get it. But before you dismiss it entirely, Let's look at why these practices actually work, or at least are claimed to.
Fair enough. I'm open to hearing more. Hit me with the science behind the woo-woo.
All right, challenge accepted. So we'll get into the specifics of those daily practices, and then we're going to tackle something called billionaire brainwave. You sent that link too, right, in the next part. Stay with us.
All right, so you were about to break down these daily practices for rewiring our brains for wealth. Still a bit skeptical, but I'm all ears.
Okay, well, let's start with visualization. I know it gets a bad rap sometimes, but there's actually some pretty interesting research on how it can impact our brains and behavior.
Yeah, I've heard about like athletes using visualization to improve their performance. Is it kind of the same idea here?
Exactly. When you vividly imagine yourself achieving a goal, your brain actually fires in a similar way to if you were actually experiencing it. It's like a mental rehearsal. So in the context of wealth, it's about creating this clear picture in your mind of what financial abundance looks and feels like for you.
So instead of just like wishing I had more money, I'd actually like picture myself living that life, like the house, the travel, that feeling of financial security.
Precisely. And the more details you can add, the more powerful the visualization becomes. Like the sights, the sounds, even smells. It's about engaging your senses and emotions to really create this compelling mental movie.
Okay, but isn't that just going to make me feel worse about my current situation? Like rubbing salt in the wound, so to speak.
That's where the next practice comes in, gratitude. And this one's really important because it helps shift your focus from what you lack to what you already have.
Okay, I get the concept of gratitude, like in general, but being grateful for like my ramen noodle budget when I'm dreaming of a beachfront villa seems, difficult.
Yeah, I hear you. It's not about like denying your desires or pretending to be happy with less. It's about recognizing the good that's already present in your life. Even if it's not financial, maybe it's your health, your supportive friends, or even just a sunny day. The more you focus on those things, the more you cultivate that abundance mindset, which ironically can actually attract more abundance.
Okay. So it's not about tricking myself into thinking I'm rich. It's more about appreciating what I have while I'm like working towards something bigger. I could see how that could help with motivation, but how does it actually like attract wealth?
Well, it's about energy. When you're in that state of gratitude, you're vibrating at a higher frequency, so to speak, and like attracts like, so you're more likely to attract opportunities and resources that align with that abundance frequency.
Okay, all right. I'm willing to give it a try. So what else is in this like wealthy person's daily routine?
Well, the article also talks about something called active opportunity scanning, which is a fancy way of saying be on the lookout for ways to create value and solve problems.
So instead of just going through the motions, I should be more aware of my surroundings and think, how can I contribute here? What needs fixing?
Exactly. It's about training your brain to see those gaps in the market, those unmet needs that you could potentially address.
Okay, so we've got visualization, gratitude, and opportunity scanning. It's starting to feel like a full-time job. But is there any evidence that this stuff actually works?
Well, it's tough to measure directly, but there's definitely a lot of anecdotal evidence out there. And if you think about it, these practices actually align with a lot of what we already know about successful people. They tend to be highly focused, grateful, and always looking for ways to improve things.
All right, fair point. But before we get too deep into the self-help side of things, you mentioned this billionaire brainwave thing earlier, and I have to admit, that one really piqued my curiosity.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like something out of like a sci-fi movie, right? But it is based on this idea of brainwave entrainment, which, to be clear, is a real phenomenon.
Okay, can you remind me how that works?
Sure. So our brains produce these different electrical patterns, or brain waves, depending on our mental state. You know, you've got the slower waves that are associated with deep sleep, and then you have the faster waves that are associated with focus and alertness. And brainwave entrainment uses these external stimuli, like sound or light, to basically nudge your brain towards a specific frequency.
So in theory, if you could identify the brainwave pattern of a billionaire in like money-making mode or whatever, you could replicate that frequency and essentially hack your brain into being a financial genius.
That's the claim behind billionaire brainwave, but it's definitely a big leap. There is some research on using brainwave entrainment for things like reducing stress or improving sleep. But the evidence for like rewiring your brain for wealth is, well, let's just say it's thin.
So should I be adding binaural beats for billionaires to my playlist? Or is this just another get-rich-quick scheme?
I'd say approach with caution. There's no harm in trying it out, but I wouldn't bet my retirement fund on it just yet. And even if it doesn't magically transform your finances, I think it does raise an interesting question, like how much control do we actually have over our mental states? And how can we leverage that for success?
That's a good question, and it makes me wonder, are there any other, maybe like more evidence-based approaches to understanding this wealthy mindset?
Actually, there's a whole field dedicated to that. It's called neuroeconomics, and it basically combines neuroscience, economics, and psychology to understand how our brains make financial decisions.
Okay, now that sounds like something I could get into.
Let's dive into that next, along with some practical takeaways from this whole wealth attraction conversation. We'll pick it up right after a quick break.
All right, my brain is officially full. Visualization, gratitude, brainwaves, you've given me a lot to think about. But before we wrap up this whole wealth attraction deep dive, you mentioned something called neuroeconomics. What is that exactly?
Well, it's a fascinating field. It studies how our brains make financial decisions. It's like peeking under the hood to see what's really driving our choices about money.
So instead of just assuming that people are like rational actors, it looks at the emotional and psychological factors that come into play.
Exactly. Neuroeconomics uses tools like brain imaging to study how our brains respond to things like risk, reward, and uncertainty.
Okay, so how does that relate to attracting wealth? Is there some secret brain hack that I'm missing?
Not exactly a hack, but what's interesting is that neuroeconomics has shown that our brains are actually wired to avoid losses more than we're driven to seek gains.
Yeah, that makes sense. It hurts more to lose $100 than it feels good to gain $100.
Exactly, and this loss aversion bias can lead us to make decisions that aren't in our best financial interest. Like we might hold on to those losing investments for too long, or avoid taking calculated risks that could actually lead to big rewards.
So understanding how our brains work can help us make smarter financial decisions.
Absolutely. By becoming aware of these biases, we can start to override them and make choices that are more aligned with our long-term goals.
Okay, that's really empowering. It's like we're not just at the mercy of our emotions. We can actually train our brains to be better with money.
Exactly. And that kind of brings us back to the heart of this whole wealth attraction conversation. It's not about magic or shortcuts. It's about understanding yourself, your beliefs, and your behaviors around money. It's about developing a mindset that actually supports financial growth. And that takes effort, intention, and consistency.
Okay, so let's bring this all together. If I want to apply some of what we've learned today, what are some practical takeaways? Like, where should I even start?
That's a great question. And remember, this deep dive is tailored specifically for you. So the best starting point is what resonates most with you. But here are a few ideas to consider.
Perfect. Hit me with them.
First, try incorporating those daily practices we discussed. Visualization, gratitude, and opportunity scanning. You don't have to do all of them at once. Maybe pick one that feels most accessible to you and commit to it for a week or two. See how it impacts your mindset and your energy.
Okay, I can do that. Small steps, consistency, I'm getting it. What else?
Second, start paying attention to your money beliefs. Catch yourself when those negative thoughts pop up. Challenge them, question their validity, and start replacing them with more empowering beliefs.
All right, I'll try to be more mindful of my self-talk. What about the environment piece? Any tips there?
Yeah, so think about your surroundings. Are there any small changes you can make to create a more supportive space for your financial goals? Maybe it's decluttering your workspace, creating a vision board, or surrounding yourself with inspiring books or images.
I like that. It's about setting myself up for success, not just mentally, but physically too.
Exactly. And remember, this is a journey, not a destination. There's no finish line when it comes to attracting wealth. It's an ongoing process of growth, learning, and adjustment.
This has been such an insightful conversation. I went from being skeptical about this whole wealth attraction thing to feeling like I actually have some tools and strategies that I can use.
That's the power of knowledge
Oh,
and a willingness to explore different perspectives. And hey, who knows, maybe you'll even try out those billionaire brainwaves, just for kicks.
huh. Maybe I will. But even if I don't become a billionaire overnight, I feel like I've gained a valuable understanding of how our minds work and how we can leverage that to create a more abundant life. Not just financially, but in all areas.
That's a wonderful takeaway. And remember, wealth is not just about money. It's about living a life that feels rich, fulfilling, and aligned with your values.
Beautifully said. Well, thank you so much for this deep dive. It's definitely given me a new perspective on what it means to attract wealth.
It was my pleasure. And to you, our listener, remember, the journey starts with a single step. So what will your first step be?